Poor Lynn. I hope she comes back. I would like to speak a little bit about our book, Unshakeable, that we are starting to work our way through. We are now in midway into chapter 2. And I wanted to start just by chatting a little bit more about the nervous system. And you'll all recall that Joanne had that cute little thing she did with her puppet arm. And I'm going to do something similar. I won't have everything drawn, but it's such a good way of remembering for ourselves that we have, first of all, this vagus nerve. This is symbolizing basically this main nerve that runs down our spine. And that is the thing that connects the base of our head to all of our organs, all of our life support systems. And that nerve comes down through the spine, and then it has all of these tentacles that wrap into and help to influence and inform the organs on how to operate. So that is a nervous part of the nervous system that is telling the organs to speed up, alert, fight, flight, or slow down. Everything's safe. Breathe, relax, much like we did just now. And then above that is this brain stem that has the amygdala, that is conveying all the information down through the vagus nerve. And above that brain stem is what that alert face that Joanne had drawn on her hand. And that is the limbic system that has the amygdala and the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is where we store our memories. And the amygdala is the part of our brain that is constantly in communication with the hippocampus and this brainstem and vagus nerve. And it's the one that's got its foot on the gas pedal. And it's a very alert system that pays attention whether or not we're conscious of it. If you've ever walked into a room and suddenly like the hairs on the back of your neck just stand up, but you don't know why, it's like you're picking something up on high alert. And then covering all of that is our cerebral cortex. And that is the gray matter that we usually see. It's the thinking part of our brain and the what we call executive function. So the reasoning. What's interesting and what I wanted to share with you tonight is that we're born with our brain stem completely formed, able to have all of our life support systems operate. So we are born with the ability to have our heart pumping, and our lungs are bringing in just the right amount of oxygen, and our digestive system is working. And that's all very much at the root of the brain. And then slowly we learn how to, or the information comes into our hippocampus and this amygdala system. And that when we cry because we have a need, and something happens, we go, oh, if I do this, then this happens. And we start learning as we age this very basic emotional relationship. And then later, this whole cerebral cortex comes online. And one of the interesting things is it doesn't really fully mature until we're somewhere between 23 and 25 years old. This is why it's so terrifying to be the parent of a teenager, because they look mature, they look like adults, but we know as parents that this whole executive functioning, it's hit or miss still. One of the parts that we can, or insights that we can learn from this process of development is that the brain is coming on board, if you will, over a period of time. And in the meantime, we have these neural pathways that are being created. So we end up with a lot of neural pathways or habit energies that are really, really old and deep, formed in our youth, our very young years. And sometimes these neural pathways are helpful for life because what's happening is the body is creating this relationship between the amygdala and the hippocampus, this memory and response, very early as a survival mechanism. And so if we've survived, there's a lot of things in here that are working for us. But we're also, as adults, walking around with a lot of established neural pathways of our emotional responses that aren't really fully informed yet by our cerebral cortex. Huh. And as all of that is developing, we are encountering stressors, and this is at any age throughout our lives. And the stressors leave a memory of that threat and response that has helped us to survive, the memory of the stress and what we've done to respond that has worked. And the 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 workings are brilliant, magnificent, and imperfect. So what happens when we get a new stimulus is the amygdala grabs the closest memory in terms of its similarity, and in terms of that that strong neural pathway, and uses that to inform the whole nervous system what it's supposed to do. So we end up with responses that have worked in the past for whatever reasons that might not be appropriate or nuanced enough to the present moment information, to the present moment circumstance. So some of these well-worn neural pathways are super helpful, and some of them are not so helpful to us anymore. And let me just I'm going to come back to that, but what I'd like to do is, in talking about stressors, let me share with you my screen, because I want to say a little bit more about stressors, so you know what I'm talking about. And here we have stress and trauma, signs and symptoms. And we can think about stress and trauma as a continuum. That trauma is stress on steroids, and we're all experiencing daily stressors, traumas with a small t, and then occasionally we end up with these traumas with capital T's. And the symptoms of them can be anything from, let me go ahead and get this going, anything from, if we're into the fight or flight response of the amygdala and the vagus nerve, we end up with high blood pressure, tight muscles, anxiety and anger, racing thoughts, lack of concentration. If we've gone into the shutdown mode, that freeze mode, well, then maybe we're just sleeping too much. We've lost our appetite. We're feeling not anxiety, but apathy. Rather than anger at someone, we're feeling completely disconnected. Maybe our thoughts are slowing down. Maybe we're lacking motivation. And then, similar to both, whether it's flight or shutdown, our responses like forgetfulness, which is really interesting because when that amygdala is really busy, it's no longer paying attention to the hippocampus. So those memories are hard to access because this is all just firing and really busy. Both fight or flight or shutdown mode have guilt and shame, can have it. They can have avoidance responses, or they can disorient our thinking. So I think that those are, those are experiences that all of us can relate to. And we can understand that they're very human. And when we get to the point of trauma, what Joanne says in her book about that is that trauma is when our body goes into an automatic response or an automatic reaction, even when there is no present moment threat. So there's this memory of the threat that's super strong. And for whatever environmental reasons or internal reasons, that memory activates the amygdala, and the response starts, but it's not based upon what's actually happening in the surroundings. And that is the nature of post-traumatic stress. So we have an awareness that mindfulness is not therapy. And I think it really is important to keep reminding ourselves of that. But what we also know is scientifically is that mindfulness can do a lot of great things to help support us. It can make us literally less reactive to stressors. It can also help us to recover from the stressors in our life more quickly, more easily. And it does this, scientists know, because they can actually see in time, real time, that mindfulness is dampening the activity of the amygdala. You know how things light up in the brain? They can actually see that mindfulness calms down the activity. And it also increases the number of connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So rather than always going through the hippocampus to these memories, these new neural pathways are being created to the cerebral cortex, which is a present moment operation of our brain. So we're getting more direct information about what's happening here and now through these increased connections. And also, you know, when I was growing up, we always heard, oh, you only have so many brain cells and then you're done. So don't waste them on, you know, toxic chemicals and drinks. Turns out that the cerebral cortex actually can thicken and grow through mindfulness. So it is a dynamic thing that's happening up here. I want to talk about two more points and then we'll open it up for Dharma sharing. The first that she raises, which I think is super connected to our mindfulness practice, is this reality of co-regulation. And co-regulation is when we pick up a vibe in a community. And that vibe can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Neutral, I'm always impressed when I go and vote, and all of the people that are welcoming and handing you the ballot and bringing you over to your voting booth and all that. They're all very neutral, very friendly. They're glad you're voting. And to me, that's one of the most precious things about our system, is that nobody's asking you who you're voting for and then starting in on that conversation. It's neutral by design. Unpleasant co-regulation for me lately has been when I watch film footage from Gaza. It doesn't take long before I am feeling injured, panicked, sad, feeling like the start of trauma, the association, the devastation, the compassion, all of it is like, whoa. The pleasant co-regulation is something that we do here in Sangha. You know, we practice to take care of our own needs and to transform our own suffering. And as we're doing that, we do it in such a way, we show up in such a way that our calm and our caring and our skillful listening and speaking is supporting others in the same process. So we are collectively creating this space, co-regulating a space of safety and a space of mindful awareness. Another great part of pleasant co-regulation, I'll just share a story from the Wayback Machine. Before I was married, I was living in Chicago, and I was having a really bad day, and I was grumpy as all get out, and I hopped into a taxi cab. And this cab driver said, "Where are you going?" And I told him. He said, "Oh, that's about 10, 12 minutes away. You're going to be a different person when you get out of this cab." And I'm like, right. And as he's talking, and he's just talking away, and I'm looking at this cab, and he has wallpapered the entire interior of the cab with newspaper articles about himself as the happy cab driver. And he was sharing this joy that he just carried and shined. And by the time I got out of that cab, I was a completely different person. He did it. And I said, "I don't know how you did that." But he regulated me up to where he was in the most authentic and beautiful way that I'm still talking about it 40 years later. The power of co-regulation is so important that it actually is at the heart of one of my all-time favorite sutras. It is the Discourse on Happiness. And it starts out this ancient teaching with seekers coming to the Buddha, and they're asking him a question of, basically, how do we be happy? And here's what they say. They say, "Buddha, many gods and men are eager to know what are the greatest blessings which bring about a peaceful and happy life. Please, Tathagata, will you teach us?" This is the Buddha's answer. Number 1, not to be associated with the foolish ones, to live in the company of wise people, honoring those who are worth honoring. This is the greatest happiness. I see Jackie smiling. It's like you gotta pick your friends, You have to be aware that we co-regulate, and if we're in a community of people that are attached to their suffering, it will impact us. And so, there's many other things that the Buddha says, but number 1 is not to be associated with the company of foolish ones. The final thing that I'd like to just share that I thought was really important in this part of the chapter is when she's talking about conditioning or conditioned responses. And here's where we circle back again to the neural pathways and how they're formed. And so many are formed when we're young. So many are unexamined. And then we are, in our practice, Thich Nhat Hanh calls them our habit energies. Stimulus response with no break in between to stop and pause. It's like, oh, that's just an energy that's circulating out of habit. And Joanne writes that the more we do something that has an impact on us, the stronger the impact becomes. Our ability, however, to strengthen or weaken a conditioned response is transformative. So we have the ability to strengthen or weaken one of these conditioned responses. And you all already know how to do that because it's part of our practice. It's about selective seed watering. So we have all the seeds of possibilities in our store consciousness, that circle. And in the lower half of the circle are all of those seeds. And then one of them sprouts up into our mind consciousness, our awareness. And if it's a wholesome seed, we embrace it with mindfulness. We invite it to stick around for a while. If I'm feeling sympathetic joy for a friend, I'll say, oh, maybe I should write that person a letter and just tell them how happy I am for them. Or maybe I'll send flowers or give them a phone call. Or, we just invite that sympathetic joy to stick around. And eventually it'll return to our stored consciousness, but it'll return stronger. Whereas if we have a seed pop up that's envy, and maybe we have a lifetime of going, oh, I wanted that tiara. I wanted to rip it off her head and put it on my own head. And how come I never get to wear the tiara? And, whatever the envy is. That is strengthening that neural pathway. But if instead we go, oh, I want that tiara, but not today. No, I really see how that tiara is so appealing to me, but I don't have to have it, but I really want it. But I'm just going to let it be today. Yeah, not today, maybe another time. If we just take the energy off of it and don't feel like we have to act on it. It sounds silly, but that neural pathway weakens because it's been mindfully acknowledged, not pushed away, but mindfully acknowledged. And the energy comes off of it. And especially when we don't act on it, it gets weaker. So this is the art of happiness that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about. It's inviting up the wholesome seeds that are really nourishing to us, having them stick around, and then actually just acknowledging and releasing those seeds that don't serve us anymore. So I will stop there. I hope you see that, this anatomy of our brain can help to shine a little bit light on the actual workings of the mind and how that interrelates with our practice. With our Dharma sharing, I'm going to invite a few questions for you, maybe to think about, respond to. Any insights you have or things that are coming up for you about stressors in your modern life, or and what you do to release that stress, how you're working with that. That would be helpful not only to you, but to others to hear, perhaps. Maybe something about your experience with co-regulation. Have you had an encounter with a cab driver that changed your day, or something of the same sorts? Do you have any experience in working with and transforming habit energies? Or anything that might have come up with you that you still feel you'd like to share about our somatic yogic experience. So all of those things are on the table. I bow out and open the floor. Thank you, everyone.
Excuse me. Stop recording.